We're delighted to be teaming up with Naked Wines across the Ashes. Wine plays a big part in both Australia and England, whether you're winding down after a long day or making plans to watch the action from home. Naked Wines make discovering and enjoying great wine easier than ever. They connect you directly with world-class independent winemakers, so you get brilliant bottles for up to 33% less than you'd pay on the high street, and the winemakers get paid fairly for their craft. We've got a selection behind us in the studio today. So as the Ashes heats up, make sure you got something decent in your glass. Head to nakedwines.co.uk/Wisden for an £80 voucher and 12 top-rated wines for just £64.99. Links are all in the description. Use Wisden for both your code and password. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. The Ashes is just 10 days away. We now have an Australian squad, 15-man squad with just one player in it under the age of 30. There's a new batch of England central contracts. We talk about the likely Australia 11. We talk about their bench strength, and we also hear about a cricket book, a new one from one of our panelists that I think a lot of you are going to really enjoy this Christmas. I'm Yas and with me today are Lawrence Booth, and for the first time in a very long time, the broadcaster and friend of the show, Adam Collins. Colo, good to have you on.
Yes, there was a time when I was on this podcast every other week, going back to the early days of it, and its predecessors as well. There were a number of Wisden podcasts until you took the reins and turned this into the juggernaut that it is. So great to be back with you.
Bedtime Tales for Cricket Tragics. More on this later on. First of all, I love the name, by the way, because it does exactly what it says in the tin.
Yeah, that was the idea. We didn't want to look. This isn't going to win. It isn't going to win the Pulitzer Prize. You know what I mean? But what it's designed to do is be a very nice, gentle read, but with some fun rogue stories of cricket's past. Perfect for Christmas is our sense. And also, you know, we've been making this story time spin-off from our pod for about, I think we started it in like the fourth week of the pandemic when the world broadly stopped and we needed to find other ways to make the show. And we must have like 1,600 stories in the bank. So picking 22, the biggest challenge for the book was narrowing it down to just 22. And we're proud with where we've landed.
Before we head over to Mark Butcher, we're going to use you on this show as our Australian man. We've not had many Aussie voices on the show recently. Okay. So first, do you or do you not endorse the following back page from the West Australian newspaper? Kiwi-born Ben Stokes, the King of England's self-proclaimed reinvention of cricket, dubbed Bazball, has sauntered into Perth confident the crazed brand of carefree and careless thrash batting, untested on Australia, will reclaim the Ashes, despite the hype England's cavalier style has been overshadowed by their persistent whinging. What do you make of the noise from Australia?
It's predictable. I think perhaps more in this Ashes cycle than in previous, owing to how much attention there's been on this particular England team. This isn't a normal England team. This is the saviour of the world England team. According to Australian fans, the saviour of the world England team who are there to make sure that Test cricket lives for another 150 years. Like that's the way in which they have been interpreted. That's the filter in which they're arriving in Australia. They didn't do themselves many favours on that front back in 2022. I know they've dialed down the rhetoric in recent years, but yeah, I think that I wrote a piece for the magazine for Wisden Cricket Monthly about this maybe 2 or 3 months ago, that in Australia there's a sense that why does Test cricket need saving? Like it's ubiquitous. It's the defining national conversation for so much of the year, especially in the summer. So they don't quite get over here where there are fundamental challenges with cricket in ways that aren't recognisable to Australians. That's the serious part of the answer. The more playful part of the answer is we are expecting this, whether the series is here or in Australia, that the tabloids have their fun at this stage. The second back page was funnier. The one where they called him a loser and said he has no mates, netting on his own and calling the fast bowlers lazy. So there's a media outlet in Australia called Yahoo Sports Australia. And they are the real rogue ones. I'm not sure if they're real people or whether it's AI or whatever. If it is real people, I wonder why they bothered going to university and preparing to be journalists to write the types of things that they do. That's more classic clickbait. But what you'll see around the country, week to week, whoever's got the test in their city will be trying to beat the previous city for the most outrageous, most grabby back page, or front page in this case. And that will be the rhythm of the next 2 months.
You're in a not quite a unique position, but you're one of the few people who watches every Australian Test match, but also a lot of England. Yeah. Looking and listening to the pre-series build-up, Has anything stood out as one camp or one side of the contest misassessing what is likely to happen?
I wonder, I don't say this with any sort of, I think you've got to be a bit careful with people who are too emphatic about things one way or the other. I wonder whether England have missed a trick by not considering one of their more out-and-out traditional English seamers to be front and centre of this attack. The pitches in Australia in the last 3 to 4 seasons, there's been a thing going on with the Kookaburra ball. It's like steel reinforced these days. Extra layers of lacquer. The seam is far more pronounced. More like a traditional Duke's ball, actually. And the pitches have had far more live grass. You'd know, Lawrence, especially from having covered series in Oz, that we do a press conference with the curator 2 days before every test match. Now, around the world, ground staff are known as groundsmen. In Australia, it's like an artistic pursuit, a curator. And we talk to them in those terms. And each year, there's more and more grass being left on these pitches, more live grass, and test matches are more heavily slanted in favour of seam bowling instead of being flatties where everyone cashes in the top 6. So that's my one outstanding question. Do you need to play all-out pace to make the most of the natural conditions in Australia? The one caveat on that being the pitch that's the bounciest and the quickest in Australia in the last 5 years happens to be where they're starting at the casino at Perth Stadium. So that'll be fascinating about how they choose to put it together. I can imagine almost no scenario where Shoaib Bashir plays next week. I'd be flabbergasted if he plays in Perth, and how he might play a role later in the series, a bit to be determined.
Lawrence, on the type of seamer England have centred their attack around, what do you make of what Colo's saying? There's quite a lot of chat on our Discord channel this week asking similar question. Have England picked a really good attack for an Ashes that happened 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting call, actually. I was speaking to Stephen Finn the other day, who's got a book out, obviously, and I asked him about precisely that question, actually. He said, yes, it is interesting because on the tours he went on, this would be a perfect England attack. It's just out-and-out pace, and you kind of take Australia on at their own game, if you like. Who is going to be the kind of 83-mile-an-hour nibbler this time? Now, it probably would have been Chris Woakes had he not dislocated his shoulder. That would have invited ridicule because of his record in Australia, and yet he actually might have been quite useful on this tour. It may be Gus Atkinson, who is kind of drifting around 84, 83, 85. Is that kind of level? I mean, you think someone like Archer will bowl really well at Perth, especially to the 4 of the left-handers in Australia's top 7. Wood is a kind of a slightly unknown quantity, though they're banking on the fact that he's just going to click like that. That's their whole philosophy in him. But Atkinson may be the guy who is asked to make the new ball talk a bit. We will see. I think it's a fascinating point. Suddenly England are going, hang on, have we got this slightly wrong?
Yeah, and you're right about Atkinson. He's the hybrid, I think, in this attack. He can do both roles. Maybe Matty Potts as well, although I don't see Potts playing at Perth.
That's the problem.
They'd be mad not to play Tongue at Perth, right? We were all at that outstanding final round of the county championship where Tongue's reputation swelled yet further. And speaking of reputation swelling, that's what Mark Woods did 4 years ago in Australia. He's the only player who went to that series, well, not just with reputation intact, but enhanced, using that word again. So I think that Wood's experience, it makes total sense, provided that knee's fully fit, by the way. I mean, we're going on the back of, I don't know what the evidence base is that Wood is right to go right away, but let's hope they're correct in that assessment. And of course...
Wood says that he was likely available to play if needed at the end of September, but England were being very, very cautious around him. What I find really interesting, though, is that lots of people whose views I really respect are all advocating different England seamers to be playing that first test match. A lot of people say you've got to play Wood and Archer, but then you've also got Tongue, as you say, Atkinson, and also throw it in there, Bryden Carter, a brilliant winter last year, actually quietly looked pretty good in the ODIs against New Zealand too.
Well, he likes bowling with the Kookaburras, on the record as saying that. The guy who would have been perfect, we'll get onto him later, is Ollie Robinson. Now, it's an absolute heartbreaker for England that relationship has fallen apart. We'll talk about the reasons to come, but Ollie Robinson, 83 miles an hour on nibbly pitches, at his peak was one of the best bowlers in the world. I don't care what people say about his character or whether they like him or not as a bloke. That is a big blow for England.
I agree. I don't know whether we're going to talk about Ollie Robbie in more depth later on. It sounds like we're going to, based on your nods there, Yas. But yeah, the most exciting combination would be, as much as I'm reluctant to suggest this because I want Atkinson to play and have an influence in this series, would be actually Carson Tongue as the supporting staff, going actually all out. This is plan A. We're going to try and rough them up. We're going to give it our best with these 4, and whatever will be, will be. That would be in terms of style and contrast, the most interesting thing when you consider that Australia certainly won't be doing that with Boland, and they're going to play a specialist spinner in line, clearly. So, yeah, lots to play out around the selection table.
Anyway, next up, Mark Butcher. Butch, we're just over 10 days away from the first ball of the 25-26 Ashes. We now know the Australian squad. There's only one guy in it, Cameron Green, under the age of 30. Now that you've seen the squad, it includes 31-year-old opener Jake Weatherald. Not guaranteed that he played. There's some chat in Australia that Labuschagne might open, Green at 3 and Webster play at 6. But now that you've seen the Aussie squad, what do you make of how the Aussies are lining up?
Pretty good. I guess the main thing, I suppose, particularly in the batting, is that Labuschagne seems to have rediscovered what made him so prolific in the early part of his Test match career, churning out runs for fun in the Shield, which is a huge boon for Australia, because I think they were loath really to sort of throw in any of the other likely lads who none of whom have really set the world on fire over the last couple of years. So they were desperate for one of their old hands, one of their experienced hands, to kind of to quieten down the doubts as to whether or not he was still top class. And I think he's done that. You know, was under pressure and has responded in the best possible way by churning out big runs. What was he got? 300-400s already in the Shield this year. So that's a very good news story for them. The interesting thing, I suppose, is whether or not they decide to go on the slightly defensive front, which I think would be to play both Webster and Green, with Green at 3 and have Labuschagne open, or whether or not Labuschagne bats at 3, which I think would be a preferable lineup for them. With the new fella Jake Weatherald, the 31-year-old new fella Jake Weatherald opening the batting on debut. So I mean that's their call really. The rest of it is pretty much as you'd expect, with Smith Head at 4 and 5, and then Green or Carey at 6 and 7. Stark, Lyon, Boland, Hazelwood. The big miss, I suppose, is Cummins in that first Test match.
On Weatherald, he's someone who's really banged down the door. He was the leading run scorer in the Shield in 24-25. And I thought, quite interestingly, it's also how quickly he scores his runs. He was the only Australian to score more than 300 runs in the Shield last year, batting the top 4, to strike at above 55. He struck at 68. And if you look at who the other opener and the number 3 would be if he opens, Khawaja and Labuschagne, that feels quite well-rounded and balanced as a top 3. It feels, even though it's a fudge having Labuschagne opening and then Green in at 3, that's quite a one-paced top 3. And you can imagine them getting a little bit stuck. I don't know. To me, it feels like they should trust Weatherald and go with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think having somebody who naturally opens the batting is always a good thing. I mean, look, the new ball, playing against new ball in Australia, you're always under threat of an opener getting knocked over early. And I think in those circumstances, having a top class, top order batter in Labuschagne batting at 3 is preferable to having him go in first and then having Green coming in at number 3, who's yet to prove himself as being a Test match number 3 batter. So in terms of the overall balance, that would be a preferable way to go. And the fact that they've picked Weatherall out of the pack kind of gives you the idea that that's the way they're thinking too.
In England, we had some central contract news, which is always exciting. It's always quite fun going through the list of players and working out who should have been in there that isn't in there. But given that they've given contracts to 29 players, pretty much everyone you'd expect to be given one has been given one. I suppose what's newsworthy is there's a lot of 2-year contracts, and all those guys who have 2-year contracts are penciled in now to the end of the 27 Ashes and the 2027 World Cup. So Stokes is down for the end of 2027. Also Adil Rashid, despite his age, in his late 30s. the test specialists have only been given 1 year contracts. So Crawley, Pope, Bashir, which I guess isn't that much of a surprise. But I was quite surprised that Sam Curran got a 2-year contract. We've talked very positively about Curran on the podcast for the last year or so, about how he's done really well batting in the middle order. But you rewind 2 months, the start of September, he's not in either England white ball squad. He's not played a test match for 3 years. He's got a 2-year contract, which is pretty good.
It's quite the turnaround. And Will Jacks as well, I suppose you could put in a similar category, given that he missed out in any form of contract the last time that they were announced. So those two Surrey men have gone from very much on the outside to sort of being guaranteed positions of one sort or another. And possibly, in all formats as well. So yeah, that's an interesting one, interesting turnaround, and also a testament to sort of the performances that they've put in, I think, over the last 18 months or so. But as you say, the rest is pretty much as you'd expect. Rashid, perhaps a little bit of a surprise given his age, and also given that the likes of Rayan Ahmed and various others. Younger players who are going to have to come in and step in and fill that breach at some point look to have been sort of held at bay for another couple of years if Rashid stays fit and keeps his form. So that's relatively interesting. Mark Wood only getting the 1 year is perhaps is more a sort of a testament to his ailing body, I suppose, than it is his value to England and the fact that if he was 3 years younger, he would have got a 2-year deal for without any question. But it does signify that perhaps his time is coming to an end. But as you say, I think the rest are pretty much as you'd expect, and a lot of those 2-year deals are players who are going to be you'd expect to see across all three formats. And Rob Key was pretty keen to point out that. With all of the changes and all of the increased value of guys like your all rounders and your white ball players to franchises around the world, being able to keep control of them over that 2-year period is reasonably important. So there's an excellent mix there of players who are going to be predominantly test players, but also a lot of guys who are going to feature in T20 and 50 overs in those contracts. Dawson getting a 1-year deal is also interesting, I think, in that he's another player who seems to have come in from the cold, and you could sort of look at that and go, well, it's about 2 or 3 years too late, but it's a nice little boon for him at the back end of his career, and again a reward for consistent, solid performances over a very, very long period of time.
Yeah, so Baker, Dawson, Mahmood, Jamie Overton and Luke Wood all receiving full central contracts for the first time. And then there are 4 development fast bowling contracts: Eddie Jacks, Tom Laws, Mitchell Stanley and Josh Hull. Just on multi-year deals in general, finally, what do you make of them? It's still a relatively new phenomenon, brought in 2 years ago now by the ECB. Johnny Bairstow's central contract only just ended, pretty much 18 months after his last England appearance. You're making a bit of a punt in some cases. People's stories can change very, very quickly, especially after winters like the one that England have coming up with an Ashes and a T20 World Cup coming up in quick succession. There'll be some people with a view who might say that, as well as using Jamie Smith as an example, as well as he's done for England so far, a 2-year contract is a big commitment to make for a guy who has only played a handful of test matches, hasn't played a big overseas tour yet, and isn't fully established in the white ball setup yet either.
Yeah, but I agree with all of that. And I guess it's a balancing act, isn't it, from the selector's point of view, and also sort of it signifies the the financial situation of the ECB, and that they're quite willing to hand out what are significant chunks of money to people over a 2-year period, knowing that perhaps some of them won't make it through the 2 years. That's just the changing face and changing nature of the finances of top level cricket in this country. But yeah, you're always taking a little bit of a gamble when it comes to multi-year deals, and there is always that argument, perhaps, that to keep people hungry, you kind of need to make sure that that they are a little bit under the pump, not to the extent where their performances might be affected, but a little bit under the pump in terms of making sure that they're sharp and they remain hungry, etc. By having those contracts end on a yearly basis, but England see it slightly differently, and there are also challenges from the outside that were not there 20 years ago when these first things came in, or more than 20 years ago, in terms of losing control of players, or the how should you say it, the draw, I suppose, of being able to earn your money doing things that are slightly less high profile and slightly less stressful in the franchise world. So it's the changing face of international cricket, international cricketers and high profile cricketers that has kind of meant that these 2-year deals have become slightly more necessary than perhaps they were 10 years ago.
Well, let's leave it there for today. Next time we speak, we'll just be 3 days away from the first Test match. I'm going to be sad when the build-up's done. I really enjoyed the build-up.
Are you? I'm not. I'm really not. And don't forget, we've got our sort of live pod on Wednesday, haven't we?
We do.
So we'll be talking again very shortly.
Yes.
And in slightly more convivial circumstances, because we got a sponsor as well, haven't we? Is it Timothy Taylor's? There might be a few beers
Timothy Taylor's. We will not just a sponsor, but a special guest, Darren Goff, joining the live show this time, which I think will be good fun for all involved.
Excellent. All right. Well, I shall look forward to that. I'll look forward to that as much as I'm looking forward to the end of the endless build-up.
Nice one. Lawrence, the Australia squad is old. Cam Green is the only member of the 15 that's under 30. Here's a stat from Swamp on Twitter. If England added Ian Botham and David Gower to their Ashes squad, the average age of the England squad would still be, on average, 135 days younger per player than the Australian squad. Does this matter at all?
It's a good one. I see lots of people have been claiming that stat as their own. If you look on X,
He was first.
He was first. Well, good on Swamp.
Tends to be.
Australia have picked a squad, a team to win this Ashes. They want to avoid the humiliation of losing at home to England. That's what it is for Australia. They've lost 5 series since the Second World War at home to England. It's a once in a generation thing. No one wants to be in charge when you lose at home to England. So they have thrown all their eggs in the let's beat England basket and will deal with the future after the Ashes. That's what's going on here. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I think Greg Chappell wrote that, 35's the new 30. That's the kind of thinking. These guys are generally fitter now. The fast bowlers, okay, Cummins has broken down, and if Hazelwood or Stark do at some point, that could be a problem for Australia. It's still an incredibly good team. I wouldn't get too worked up about the age. Australia can deal with it. They regenerate pretty well in general. Look at the Australian cricketing history. They have the odd blip. Probably the longest one was in the mid-80s under Border. But generally speaking, they react quite quickly. If it goes wrong in the Ashes, that's a problem for them, because then people will leap all over them and go, we told you they were too old, and then they'll have to deal with that. But I don't think it's going to go badly wrong for them.
Colin, we had a question directed at you from Jolie on the Discord. He says, I would be interested in Adam's view on how the Australian team got to the point they are without strong contenders coming through to replace the ageing side. I'm not in any way suggesting they aren't still a really good team, but the fact that only one of the squad is under 30 is startling. Is it a symptom of their success, or is it a problem in the Aussie system that it isn't bringing through players that are able to force their way in? Even the new guys aren't very young.
Yeah, I get it. I think it is the former. I think it is a function of the success of this particular team. And Lawrence is bang on, by the way. You lose to England at home and you're going home in a body bag, you know what I mean? Like that's how it works in Australian cricket. Administrators, coaches, captains, it's to borrow a phrase from another, actually, it's lambs to the slaughter. So if that were to happen, that is the natural response. When they lost the first test to India at Perth last year, it was cricketing crisis stuff, So they're mindful of that, although the decisions aren't governed by that either. I think what you need to do when looking at this Australian squad is go through and think about who might have been jettisoned in favour of younger players. Are we saying that Nathan Lyon should have been sacked for Corey Rocacholi? No. Are we saying that, let's pick another player, that Travis Head or Stephen Smith should be omitted owing to their age, or Scott Boland shouldn't be in the starting 11, or Mitchell Stark, or Josh Hazelwood, or Alex Carey? Like, who, as Margaret Thatcher once said, who are these people and what are their names and where do they live? Who are these people who needed to be sacked from the Australian team in order to make room for fresh batters. Now, you could form an argument around the very top of the order. Khawaja is the low-key big story coming into this Ashes. No one's talking about it because they were never going to dispense with 2 incumbents after the West Indies. When it became very clear that Constas wasn't going to make the grade, and that's fine, by the way. He was a teenage sensation, made a mark at the first time of asking. His sophomore album wasn't a particularly good one. He has to go away and work on his art, right? That's great. That's pretty normal across the board, no matter what country you're from. But when they were considering one opening spot, that made it absolutely certain that Khawaja was playing, helped along by some decent scores in the Shield. But if Khawaja doesn't start well, remembering that he was vulnerable against pace in the West Indies and he got worked over by Bumrah last year, as they all did, I hasten to add. But still, the point stands that the question mark over Khawaja, nearly 39 against high pace, aforementioned Wood, Archer, Tongue, Cuss, that's really interesting to me. How long do they give Khawaja if he doesn't start the series well? And then we'll come to Jake Weatherald in a moment, but that's another player they've picked over the age of 30. They could have gone young. They could have gone, I don't know, Cam Kellaway, step into the Ashes and try and do something akin to what Sam Constas did at the MCG last year. But they've made a pick that's more about weight of runs, consistency, having made them at the right time in the lead up to an Ashes series, made them for Australia A. It's a pick based on logic and rational thinking rather than someone who they're picking for the future.
The fascinating one for me is the battle between Archer and the Aussie left-handers. Archer's got a brilliant record against left-handers across formats. In Test cricket, he averages 20 against left-handers, and it's possible that Australia have 2 lefties up top, but also obviously you got Travis Head and Alex Carey in the top 7 as well. Colo, on Jake Weatherald, English listeners probably won't know who he is. What's his story? How's he got into the team?
Journeyman, which I think's a feature, not a flaw. I think all of this, by the way, the experience thing, Greg Chappell's point about 35 being the new 30, players playing for longer, state teams being obsessed with winning trophies, that all feeds into this. And Weatherald's part of that story. He's been around for a long time. He got his state opportunities when he was a youngster. That's not always common now. It's often the case that you don't get your first Shield cracked till you're 25, 26, 27. He's been playing since I think he debuted at 20 originally in the Sheffield Shield. Has had challenges to overcome in life, stepped away from the game with depression. At one stage, he's been pretty open about the ups and downs of the professional game, as is more the custom these days. Moved states when he kind of ran his race at South Australia, although he was part of the South Australian story for a long time in getting them to the point where they could push to win the Shield for the first time in a generation, as they did in March. Goes to Tassie, averages 55 in his last 15 Shield games, does pretty much everything right. Left-hander, the one thing I would say is that over time, they'll be looking for a right-handed opener to replace, or to be in the mix, because remember that the next group coming through, Marcus Harris, left-hander, procedural fairness, next group coming through, by the way. I'm not saying that they'll get a Guernsey, but Harris deserves another go. Left-hander, Matt Renshaw, left-hander. So where Weatherald fits into that. Not saying that you can't have 2 lefties up top, but the ideal outcome is there's a right-hander who emerges. But yeah, Weatherald feels like the pick for now. He feels like, in some respects, the conservative selection, but also one that's based on merit. And isn't that what we always get angry about when players get selected not underpinned by merit? We go, hang on, shouldn't the county championship mean something? Shouldn't the Sheffield Shield mean something? Well, in this case, it has, and that's how he's found himself in the squad, although maybe not in the team. There's one last wrinkle. Maybe you want to go to that as well.
Well, yeah. So Greg Chappell, writing for Cricinfo yesterday, said that he has got the sense that Labuschagne will open with Cam Green at 3, Bo Webster at 6. It's a move that he described as being risk-averse, yet extremely risky. He finished the piece by saying, by anchoring in the harbour of familiarity, Australia selectors may have invited the very storm they sought to avoid. Perth demanded courage. The Ashes demand it. A ship is safe in harbour, but that is not what ships are for. Lawrence, what do you make of the possibility of Labuschagne opening, Green at 3, Webster at 6, over having a specialist opening Weatherald up top?
I think England would prefer Labuschagne opening a Green at 3, because you take Labuschagne away from the position he's comfortable in and you expose him to the new ball. Obviously, England will be intending to expose him to the new ball anyway on a regular basis, but this is a guy who's coming back into the Test team, so you're moving him away from his position. Then Cameron Green at 3 is as yet unproven. He averages 20 in 8 innings there. He may well end up there in his Test career, but for me, he's not a Test number 3 yet. And are you seriously throwing him at number 3 in the Ashes? That's a huge call. Now I hear the problems if he's not bowling much in this round or Bo Webster, but England would prefer that. Their idea that the Australia's top order is vulnerable will grow in conviction if that top order is Khawaja, Labuschagne, Green. It's interesting, Chappell's point about Australian conservatism, and I've long argued that they're quite a conservative cricketing culture. That has just been papered over by the fact that they've always had incredibly good players. Yeah. To be an Australian captain generally has been to throw the ball to one of your excellent four bowlers and get on with it. So I think what happens is in these moments like this, the conservatism gets exposed when there are decisions to be made. Look at the reaction the overreaction really to Constas against India last year when we were told that, that's a great idea for an opener to attack the new ball as if some other team hadn't been doing it for 2 years. There is overreactions and underreactions to Australian cricket. And I think the Weatherald is a conservative pick, and Weatherald and Khawaja will not scare England. They might grind them down, but they won't scare them. Just another point on the opening situation. Alistair Cook in 2018 and his last summer said that the previous 2 years in English cricket have been the hardest he'd ever experienced opening the batting. We've now got that situation in Australia.
Yeah.
Weatherald is coming in a nightmare moment to be an Australian opener. And it's use the phrase lambs to the slaughter. Whoever Australia picked to open the batting, and England, by the way, is going to be under the pump more than any other player in that series. So I pity Weatherald. I hope he doesn't average 15 and gets kicked out and never plays again. This is a tough ask for him.
Yeah, it is. What I would just remind you is that he's achieved significant results in those very sporting conditions in the Shield, and every Shield attack's a test attack, right? Like the depth of Shield cricket with fast bowling is so exceptional that you're not getting those runs. There's no cheap runs in the Shield at the top of the list, certainly not in the last few years in these conditions. So he's well placed to succeed. The Constas thing was interesting. You're right that there was this enormous emotional response to it. He wasn't just attacking the new ball though. He was, he tried to reverse ramp Bumrah 4 times in 3 overs on morning one of it. This was an extreme. This wasn't like conventional. This was so against convention, but it worked at the time because they knew that convention wasn't going to beat Bumrah. And it did have an effect in Australia going on to win the series. But yeah, what happens next, your point about Labuschagne opening and removing him from where he's comfortable, he's done exactly what they wanted him to do. Didn't play in the Caribbean. Did open out here, by the way, in the World Test Final. Batted quite nicely till he was dismissed in both innings, but that's a moot point. Went to the Caribbean, didn't play, spent 2 weeks in the nets with Boland. That was more compelling than the cricket. I was watching Boland versus Labuschagne every lunch break, and it was awesome in the nets with those two going absolutely hammer and tongs to impress those who were watching, media and selectors and coaches included. Labuschagne at 3 is conditional upon Green bowling in the Shield game that he starts tomorrow. Let's be really clear about this. In the depth chart, Green is going to play ahead of Weatherald, as we understand it, because they want Green. They think Green's in the best 6 batters. Pat Cummins is on the record repeatedly saying that he has no real regard for the idea of someone's batting position. He's far more in the camp of you play your best 6 batters, and they stridently believe that Green's in their best 6 batters. So if Green can't bowl, they'll want Webster to balance the attack. They're certainly not going to go in with 4 specialist bowlers. They will not run that risk. So that's and Bo Webster, in fairness, has had a sprightly start to his test career in pressurised situations to win the Border Gavaskar. He was nigh on man of the match in that test at Sydney on debut. Made a very important 70 out here in the World Test Final when Australia were collapsing. Another half century on Barbados when Australia were collapsing and taking wickets both bowling seam up and bowling off spin. So if he misses out on the Perth Test match, he'll do so in a very unlucky way. And that's the sign of a pretty good cricket team when guys are missing out who should be there.
I'd be fascinated to see how Webster goes with the ball if he plays against England, because England will try to hit him at 6 to 8 runs and over, given his pace and style of bowling, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful doing that. I think more generally, we always do this when we're analysing a squad before a series. We look at the guys who we're not sure are going to play. Yeah. More generally, I think so much of this series is going to come down to how the 2 top 3s do. The key middle order players for both teams are at 4 and 5, and I think so much of how they do will be how early they come in. I wrote a piece for the magazine just that came out last week on Joe Root and how he attributes McCullum's tactical mind to his success in recent years, in that he looks to put more pressure onto bowlers. But I actually think a massive part of his success in the last few years is his average position coming in now is 75 for 2 rather than 30 for 2. And that is obviously so much better for a batter coming in. And same for Brook beneath him, and for Australia, Smith and Head. I think that is a fascinating dynamic. And I think with both top threes, it's not really that clear how they'll do.
I mean, it's interesting that if it's spicy pitches as we're expecting, and the bowlers on top, Crawley and Duckett's approach, if it pays off 3 times out of 10, which is probably a fair ratio, I'd have thought, that could be useful. You know, if Australia are just defending or playing conventional cricket at the top of the order, England won't mind that. I mean, we saw at the Oval when England were chasing 370 against India, and they put on, 19, 13 overs, something like that, counter-attacked in difficult conditions, and actually gave England a shot at a total they should never have got anywhere near. So, you know, for all the mockery of Zach Crawley, a guy who averages 30 and they're sticking with, they'll never drop him, his approach could actually be quite useful.
I've got a quiz question for both of you. Okay. So, you don't seem very confident. I'm not.
Well,
I'm going to back Lawrence here. I'm pretty good at these things, but not as good
so
as him.
you're going to work as a team here.
Okay.
So Australia haven't given a debut to a specialist seamer since Scott Boland in 21-22. Since then, England have handed debuts to 9 specialist seamers. Who are the 9?
Okay, we can get the guys in the squad pretty quickly. Atkinson, Cass, Potts,
Tongue. Since 22, was it? Robinson.
Robinson debuted before.
He was
then.
before then. He was
21. Sorry. Yeah.
Who played this summer? Craig Overton. Jamie Overton. My apologies. Made his debut at 22 at
So
Leeds.
four more.
4 more.
One played this summer. One debuted the summer before, and then 2 debuted.
Sam Cook change going to come.
Yep.
He's the unlucky one, by the way. That pitch at the Oval you referred to before, when Wokes broke down, what they would have given for Sam Cook that week. I think it's a mistake him not being in Australia. I'm going to stick with that. Bowled well with the Kookaburra ball in the A series too. Sorry,
you're getting most of the names here, Colo.
3 more.
3 others who've made.
So made his debut in 24.
1 in 24, 2 in 22.
2 in 22.
22. We said Potts, haven't we?
Because in 22 they brought back Anderson and Broad.
But before
and he
then,
played with Potts. Oh, sorry, Mahmood and Fisher.
Yep, and one more.
They were in the Caribbean, and one more. So 24.
24
Who did
debut.
they play against in 24 years? Remind me. I would have covered
West Indies and Sri Lanka.
West Indies and Sri Lanka.
Oh, Josh Hull.
There we
Josh
go.
Hull.
There's your
Goodness
9.
me.
Oh,
Talk about a quiz question. Sorry. He's got a contract. He's probably got a 10-year contract, Josh Hull.
yeah, he's nailed on.
It's his second contract. A feature of the 21-22 tour, I don't want to overplay it, but it was a feature of it, was Australia's bench strength with the ball. Nisa, Jai Richardson, and most famously Scott Boland come in and do very well. Colin, is the bench strength in the seam bowling department as formidable this time round?
It's pretty bloody good. Brendan Doggett is a fine cricketer. He's been in multiple squads, took a 5 for overnight in the Shield. Michael Nisa not in the squad. But I reckon if someone broke down at Perth, Nisa would be a massive shout for Brisbane pink ball under lights. He's played his 2 test matches so far, as it turns out, in pink ball affairs, both at Adelaide in consecutive years. I think they were both as COVID replacements, weren't they? Something like that. And Michael Nisa, I'll always advocate for. So they'll be the next 2. I don't think Sean Abbott's necessarily to be interpreted as a come in for a seamer, although he's helpful there. Sam Perry made a good point, actually. He could well be just the concussion sub protection for about 3 different spots because he does bat beautifully. We've seen at Surrey. He's a very useful lower order player. He could slot in for that Webster Green role or a fast bowler in the event where they need a concussion sub at short notice, which is increasingly part of the game. But then you go down the list. The one vulnerability that might be there, I ponder, is if Mitchell Starc went down, there's no logical left armour. Spencer Johnson isn't playing at the moment, injured. And poor old Joel Paris, who was my smoky to make the squad, takes his Shield wickets at 20, has played for Australia in one-day cricket, albeit a long time ago. He did a hammy in round 1 of the Shield after getting a couple of wickets early on. So left armour, perhaps not. But you go down the list, I mean, someone like Fergus O'Neill will be perfectly conditioned to doing well on these pitches. He dominates everywhere he goes. You've got to be a very good cricketer to lead the Shield for wickets, as he did last year with Brendan Doggett. So I don't think the bowling is a concern. I also think, just to name one more player in this, that Xavier Bartlett's played all the white ball internationals against India in the last couple of weeks, swings the ball away, bustling approach, big, 26, little bit of generation next about him. It wouldn't surprise me if he found himself in a squad. But let's not overlook what you said before. The players who are actually going to be there, Josh Hazelwood and Mitchell Starc in tandem with Scott Boland as first change, are going to be an unbelievably challenging trio to get away. And Pat Cummins, reportedly ahead of schedule on his return to bowl loads at the moment, could be fit for Brisbane. That kind of means that they have that security blanket before you even go to Doggett and Abbott and the host of others I've just name-checked.
How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think English pundits, probably myself included, have been guilty of getting overexcited about the possibility of Australia having to delve into their Tier 2 seamers. I mean, these guys that English fans don't know much about, but they're obviously good bowlers. On the other hand, Bazball is such a mind game, and it's an approach, it's a mindset. And if England see one of these guys come in, they will target them.
Yep.
That's what will happen. So regardless of how good what they've been getting their wickets at in Shield cricket, England will think they're a weak point. You mentioned Bo Webster earlier. England's tactics will obviously be to try and hit what they regard as the weak link and put overs into the legs of the big guns. We saw the big mistake England made at Lord's 2023. Nathan Lyon hobbles off and they take Australia the short ball on and cost them the series probably, let's be honest. Apart from the rain in Manchester, we won't go there. So England have to play it. England have to play it carefully. That it's be a balance to strike, and kind of that's going to be the most fascinating aspect of this series is, do they seize the moments properly, cleverly? Do they shake off the idea that they're dumb Bazballers, shut the West Australian up?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot will come down to the ability for England to take a nuanced approach to this series, to be multifaceted in an approach, and not, they got rissoled last week in a one-day, and what was that line? Just got to go harder. If that's the approach they take when they're under pressure, just got to go harder.
Yeah, but they won't.
No, you wouldn't. You'd hope not.
That's Harry Brook kind of just expressing it in the simple terms he understands.
I get it.
Stokes will not allow that.
I get it, and I agree with you. I think the way that Stokes often plays, when he comes in, when they've lost a couple of quick wickets, he doesn't go out all out trying to go at strike at 100 or better. He'll often strike at 50 to calm things down. But nevertheless, I think that'll be such a fascinating part of the series, their willingness to adapt to circumstances. Bazball, and you articulated this beautifully in your book, Lawrence, with Holty a couple of years ago, is about not only applying pressure, but knowing when's the right time to absorb pressure. And that's the bit that I'm most interested in. Can they absorb pressure when it's Hazelwood landing it in a shoebox, Mitch Starc swinging it around corners, and Scott Boland being the most accurate bowler and indeed the most statistically effective bowler since SF Barnes. If they can, and Nathan Lyon down the other end or holding up an end, if they can play it smart and box smart, great. If they can't, or if they won't, different story. This is why it's a blockbuster series.
Also, in series that are close, one of my fears around England is I think they quite often get it wrong once and correct their course as the series goes on. You get that wrong once, as you say, in Lords in 2023. That's the second test match of the series. The first test of the series, you got the first day declaration at Edgbaston. And as time goes on, that decision looks more and more ridiculous. You make one mistake. You go too hard once, too early. That could be it for the series, because who knows how many opportunities you get against that Australian side.
Look, I think England will have to take a couple of risks to beat this Australian team. Australia are a better team than them man for man, and they're playing at home, and England haven't won a test there, let alone a series, for 15 years. So England will have to take some risks. I know that will annoy their fans, but that's what, the great, or not the great, Joe Root scoop against Jasprit Bumrah was based on that kind of logic. It's we have to do something a bit different to beat a team that is better than us in these conditions. There will be moments that will go wrong. These guys are human. But it's going to be absolutely intriguing to see if they nail those moments.
Perth means so much to England, doesn't it? I mean, I just can't get over the hurdle in my own mind of what happens to England if they're 1-0 down. My biggest fear is that, by the way. I'm not, I'm dialing up the Australian stuff today, but what I most care about is the longevity and the success of Test cricket. And having 2 all going to Sydney or a series that's live into the new year is the best possible thing for Test cricket right now, with so many challenges around the proliferation of the T20 domestic leagues and so on. And I'm worried genuinely that if Australia go 1-0 up and they bring Pat back for Brisbane, and this could get big on England very, very quickly. So, yeah, I think a lot hinges on them starting well and getting their first move right, which they botched, remember, 4 years ago when they didn't pick Jimmy and Broad for for Brisbane, which turned out to be a green top, and they lamented that, and they were playing catch up the whole way through. And that old adage about generals fighting the war that came before them, you kind of touched on that before, Yas, about, you're chasing the moment sometimes. They have to be in sync with the moment when they get to Perth.
The Ashes has an abnormally rich history of the first ball being pivotal, let alone the first hour. And in the same way that Crawley boundary first ball in 2023 was a statement of what was to come, I really hope from an England point of view, whoever wins the toss, they bowl first and can unleash that attack. And even if it's an even first session, I think having Archer, Wood and whoever joins in the attack bowling at 90 mph would be a real statement that this series is going to be different to the ones that have come before it. And I think that would be as a spectacle as well, such a cool way to start the series. Yeah,
I mean, that's England's way into the series, is bowl first at Perth and take 4 wickets by lunch. No England team has won series in Australia after losing the first test since Len Hutton in 54-55. It just doesn't happen. And don't forget, Australia have the Ashes, so if England lose the first test, they need to win 3 of the next 4, assuming there's no rain. Yeah. That's a big ask. So Perth, absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, that first ball, the Stan Worthington in 1936, and then the Burns, and then the Freitas to Slater. And then there are so many... Harmison wide. There are so many bits, right, over the journey. It's disproportionately skewed to paying attention to it. But you're bang on, right? 54-55 being the only time when the team's been able to come back in Australia and win, because it does get big on you. And it's not just on the field either. The amount of pressure that England will then be, the amount of water they'll be carrying, the decisions they'll have to make for a day-nighter at Brisbane, where Australia... Has Australia ever lost a day-nighter? I don't think they have. Oh, once to West Indies 2 years ago, famously, Shamar Joseph. They've got a game plan that works so well against the pink ball, the degree of difficulty will ratchet up. By contrast, by the way, I think if Australia lose at Perth, they won't lose their bundle. They will, I think, have the muscle memory with older blokes. You get experience. You get situations they are used to. The 23 Men's World Cup in the 50 over World Cup, where they lost their first 2 games convincingly and found a way through. Last year against India, losing by 300 runs at Perth and still winning the series comfortably in the end. There are examples where this group have done that. They'll keep their cool. So again, it comes down to so much to what England can do. Well, it's more about what they can do in Perth. England needs it. They can't lose in Perth. I reiterate that point. If Australia lose there, okay. If England lose there, I think that will bother me in terms of my want for a 2-all going to Sydney.
Chris N from the Discord asks, I know Adam likes collecting his kit. Is there a particular Ashes year of England and Australia's that is Adam and Lawrence's favourite? No ODI colours allowed, so it's white versus cream, cable knit versus no cable, Tetleys versus VB versus 4X versus Waitrose, etc., etc., etc. You've done your research, Colin.
Well, I want Lawrence to go first.
Well, pick it up. So I'm a cable knit kind of guy. I didn't like it when England went white, sort of brilliant white. I prefer cream. Yeah, it was offensive both on the eye and on the sort of taste buds. I actually have a sneaking regard for the old MCC colours, the kind of black, yellow, red that England toured as MCC until the late 70s.
Later than that.
Was it later than that? Was it 82, 83 actually?
94, 95, about to come to it in a second.
There you go, right, sorry. So, yeah, not that I'm sort of, I don't want to go back to the past, but that was quite nice and was a bit of a quirk. I'm not that fussed in general, though. Collo probably cares more about these things than me. He's the kind of guy who brings shirts in to podcasts.
Hang on, what? No, I do have a one-day. I've been asked to dial up. I'm doing another podcast later around the book and with Cricket District, and they want me to wear Australian kit, and I don't really carry that stuff around with me. I do, however, have the lightning bolts from 92, 93, and 93, 94 in a jacket that was
one for the YouTubers
that I wore on my stag do, which is my and many people's favourite one day. So I'll throw that back over there.
Sensational.
No, the test stuff though. You can't, first of all, any series that England won in the Waitrose, avoid because of the uniforms. They were just horrific. I'm sorry, I might try and get Waitrose as a sponsor one day, but it's just the truth. The all white,
not anymore.
Moving away from cable knit, those jumpers that Jimmy Anderson had to run in wearing.
Those are 50-50.
They were just horrific. Yeah. And then, to make matters worse, they went back to the cable knit when Root oversaw his first test match as captain out here against South Africa in 2017. Cable knit jumper, different colour to the shirt. It was gross. I went back and watched that innings recently. It's a hate crime.
Couldn't watch it, could you?
Well, despite how good the innings was. But yeah, MCC, my first Ashes in Australia watching as a lad was at the ground was the the fourth day of the 94-95 test at Melbourne, watching Phil Tufnell bowl 50 overs, most of them in his MCC jumper. I think that stylistically, and I watched a whole bunch of the highlights last night, there's something about that throwback of wearing the egg and bacon with that blue strip to reflect it being an England jumper that I'd love to. Of course, you can never bring it back now, but I love the idea of that wrinkle that they toured as MCC for such a long time.
A reminder, by the way, that we have been and will continue to be very busy on the old Patreon. If you want our full daily episodes during the Ashes, you've got to head to our Patreon to get them. On top of all that, we've got our extra weekly show. As always, Lawrence will be part of our daily team across the Ashes. A couple of new features as well. You can get ad-free episodes of the 2 weekly shows on the Patreon too. You can also gift a membership to a loved one or buy an annual membership yourself. You get a small discount if you sign up for a full year up front. Loads of options, all in the link in the description. You also get priority access to our live events, and we have one of them this week with Darren Goff, which should be good fun. Here it is, the ultimate cricket showdown. Cricket 26 is here, bringing you closer to the game than ever before. Take command in the all-new management career mode, engage in the intensity of the Ashes, and build your dream squad in Pro Team. With enhanced gameplay, smarter fielding, and total control at the crease, every shot, every strategy, every victory is yours. Cricket 26 is available to pre-order now. Step up and make it your moment. We talked about Ollie Robinson briefly up top. Bit of news this week. Robinson, who last played a test in India early last year, he's playing grade cricket in Australia this winter and was called up to be a net bowler at the New South Wales net, where half the Australian team were at. He gave an interesting interview with Will McPherson in the Telegraph this week, talking about his time away from the England side and how tough the last 18 months have been for him. Lawrence, if you zoom out, it's amazing that he wasn't even in the selection debate. 76 test wickets at 22.92. Were England right to move on from him so cleanly?
It's really difficult. It's a sad story. It sort of irks me when I think about it, because when he came into the team in 21, I know that it was awful circumstance on his first day when those old tweets were dug up, and they were horrible tweets, and it was right that he was held to account for them. But he proved himself to be an excellent bowler straight away. During the Bazball book we did that Colo mentioned, I interviewed Robinson for that book, and he was referring to himself, Broad and Anderson, as the three amigos. He felt he was in there with them in a way that no other English seam bowler had been accepted into the kind of inner sanctum by Broad and Anderson. He was that good. I remember in Pakistan, late 22, when he bowled Babar Azam on a very flat one, I think it was Multan, and Mark Wood said afterwards that this guy could move it off glass. They were all incredibly impressed with Robinson. He had all the skills, and then he just kind of fell away. He didn't do the fitness. He was publicly upbraided by John Lewis in Hobart. That was actually before Pakistan. Nonetheless, that was an ongoing issue with how much he was looking after his body. Now, I know in the interview with Will, which is a very good piece, he talked about his private life had been an issue. I don't think it was clearer cut than that. It was his attitude. Went to India in early 24 when they were already getting hacked off with him, and he played that one test where his first over is at 75 miles an hour. Now he has a back spasm. He drops a crucial catch, which probably cost England the series off Dhruv Jurel. And there were things going on in the dressing room at the time about him going out and practicing and the outfield and so on that persuaded Stokes and McCullum that this guy was no good. He did not buy into the kind of dedication that they needed in that team. Now, some people say that's because Bazball's a cult, and if you don't think one way, you're out. They just got fed up with Robinson. They must have been seriously fed up with him, because he's a very good bowler, and look at his numbers. What was fascinating from Will's interview was that he says he wants to be the best bowler in the world again. He wants to get back to England, into the England team. He turns, I think, 31 or 32 next month. So time isn't on his side. He won't play again under Stokes and McCullum, I don't think, unless he goes on bended knee and says, I've been a prat, please take me back. I'm taking my wickets at 20 for Sussex. Otherwise, I think he's going to have to wait to 2027, by which time he'll be 33, 34.
There'll be people listening to this wondering, what did he do wrong? Bowlers break down, bowlers oscillate in terms of speeds. And I know it wasn't just that 24 test in India. When he bowled in the 23 Ashes, he wasn't quite at full speed. There's that Rob Creek quote where he says that at 83 miles per hour, he's one of the best bowlers in the world. He's not at 75 miles per hour. Someone who's viewed as very dependable, Chris Wokes, is someone whose speeds oscillated towards the end of his career. What was it about Robinson that gave England or made England go off him so quickly? Because it was only 3 Test matches in that last year or so.
The breaking down was a sort of England regarded that as a symptom of the fact that he wasn't looking after his body properly. But it was his attitude. It was they saw someone who wasn't willing to put in the hard yards that they regard as an absolute non-negotiable to be part of the team. You hear stories. I don't want to say them now because I've not heard them firsthand myself. I'd be spreading rumours. But the general vibe you hear is that they thought that his mind wasn't right. I mean, he says in the interview he was all over the place after he got dropped by England. So that's not a state secret. It's great to hear that his mind's back on the job. I think he could still do it if he came back for England at the age of 34. I think he could still do a job for them because he's not bowled himself into the ground in the meantime. And if he's bowling 83 miles an hour, moving it both ways with his height and bounce. Oh, he's a hell of a prospect.
He was a massive handful. Wobble seam exponent, which for a time there, the pitches in Australia would suit him this year. And you're right, like I read that interview by Will as well, referring directly to his personal life in it. So what you're looking at here is a cricketer who has fallen foul of the crew who are deciding what's going on. I'm always a bit off with that stuff. Dan Brettig wrote a really good book about, 12, 13 years ago called Whitewash to Whitewash. And the strong through line was that at the top level for Australia, they accept that representative teams need to take all types. It isn't a club team where being pally with the captain and the coach can help bolster the team culture or whatever. Representative teams are fundamentally cut differently, and the best Australian teams have understood that, which is why they accommodate rogue types over the years, over generations. And this is where, I genuinely feel sorry for what happened with Robinson in 24 in India. There was so much scrutiny over him breaking down in Hobart a couple of years before that about his fitness levels, about his weight and all these other bits and bobs. He came back fit. As you remember, he came back to playing for England after that series in Australia, had lost a whole heap of weight. I think Will wrote that interview too from memory. He'd lost 7 kilo or something like that, so a stone in old money. And his bowling hadn't deteriorated at all. So in India, you press fast forward. The next time there's a genuine fitness concern, he tries to bowl through it, has a back spasm, probably tries to demonstrate to the world that I am made of tougher stuff. But all we see on the bottom of the TV screen is 73 mile an hour. And you are immediately identified as, well, why is he bowling 73 mile an hour? Isn't having a crack. And the nuance is lost out of it all. And one thing leads to another. And I know that's not the only thing that contributed to his downfall in that England team, but I felt for him with that particular example because I felt that was a function of him trying to make up for what happened with his body in Australia the previous time they were there. And let's not forget, it was Ollie Robinson who made all the inroads to Australia at Hobart, and at different points through the series looks like a genuine threat in Australia, which not many do. So, yeah, I like to think there's room for him to make a comeback. For all of the things that have happened with him, the social media posts, the other stories that swirled around his involvement in English cricket the first time around. I think that the game needs to provide people with the ability to improve as players and improve as human beings and improve as professionals. And if this interview is anything to go by, he knows that as well. And hopefully there is a pathway back for him because he's too good not to play Test cricket again.
Your perception of a player is so clouded by the cricket you actually watched. I think that in Australia, Australians have seen his pace go down during series. And I actually think that outside of England, people don't quite realise how good he was. So I don't think it's a stretch to say he was a world-class Test match bowler. He was number 4 in the Test rankings. There's that tour, not just to Pakistan, but the one to New Zealand that followed, where he was amazing. He was absolutely brilliant in that home series against South Africa as well.
And India in 21
when
he first emerged.
By the way, when he was supposedly unfit in Australia, he was still averaging 25.
Well, this is my point. He and Wood were the only two. Yeah. I mean, I know Anderson at Melbourne was brilliant too, and there were moments for Broad, but really Robinson and Wood were the ones who, more often than not, looked like they could actually make inroads in Australia. That's all been forgotten now.
Colo, you and your final word colleague, Jeff Lemon, have a new book out, Bedtime Tales for Cricket Tragics. You talked about the origin for it early in the show. I read a lot of the book last night on a severely delayed Avanti West Coast train down from Glasgow.
Best kind.
If you like quirky tales about cricket, this is a book for you. Chapter 1, by the way, is extraordinary. A blow-by-blow account of the biggest margin of victory in first-class cricket when a Pakistani team called Railways beat Dera Ismail Khan by an innings and 851 runs.
I tried to go there a couple of years ago to DIK. When I was in Pakistan in 22 for the Test series, I tried every way of getting to Dera Ismail Khan, but it didn't quite play out. That group of students, all teenagers who never played before and never played again. And it was a fairly brutal entry to, a game that probably shouldn't have had first-class status, but such is the joys of categorisation that it still has it to this day.
I don't want to give too much away from the book, but to give a flavour of what else is in store, Colin, do you want to tell us about one of this country's most talented and accomplished cross-discipline sportsmen, Andrew Stoddart?
Oh, the inexhaustible A.E. Stoddart. I'm sure Lawrence knows a fair bit about him as well. So Stoddart, a lot's been written about him over the years. Frith wrote about him, and Simon Wilde wrote about him when charting the highest score in all cricket. And this actually relates to that story too. So long story short, and it is a long story, 1882, I haven't got the book in front of me, 1882, I'm pretty sure. It's 1880, isn't it? 1880. He's playing for Hampstead Cricket Club. And that's when I first found this story, because I was playing for Hampstead in 2012, and I learnt about the tale of Stoddy, who had a night on the tiles, a night playing cards, a night of dancing, stayed out literally all night, had a bit of a kip in the clubhouse, had some food, and went out to bat and opened the batting at 11:30 at Lummington Road there against Stoics. And he proceeded to bat for 6 hours and 10 minutes and make 485 with not a minute's sleep. The highest score in all cricket to that point in time, a record that lasted for quite a time as well. Then afterwards, he celebrated by playing 5 sets of tennis next door at the Cumberland Lawn Tennis Club, got on the gas again, went out dancing till 3 a.m. Couple of days later, made another double ton for Hampstead. Couple of days after that, made a 90 for Middlesex, got 100 for Middlesex, his first-class 100, all in the same week. This was a lad of lads. But he also captained England in rugby, played 10 rugby internationals, captained 4 of them, and I would say made one of the great Ashes hundreds at Melbourne in 1894 when he made his 173, which remained the highest score for an England captain in Oz, and I think it's the best Ashes ever.
I was just about to say that. We did a Patreon episode on the best Test series ever.
1894-95.
I didn't know anything about
England win after
this
following
series.
on at Sydney.
England win by 10 runs after following on at Sydney. It is a wild series, and Stoddy contributes to them going 2-0 up. Then Australia win 3 and 4, and England win the 5th, and they win the Ashes in Australia.
2-9-7, 4 down.
A stack. And Stoddart was captain of that team. Now, very sadly, he died of suicide some years later. And I think there is something in his manic. If you read the literature around him, I think that was in line with his personality of the weekend I refer to, where he doesn't sleep a wink and rattles off the highest score in world cricket in the middle of all of that. But yeah, that's a story we've told at our live shows, and I feel sort of a bit of a kinship with the guy because of the Hampstead thing. We did 10 years ago, 2015. I took a team out. I was touring here covering the 15 Ashes. Went back to Hampstead and did a Stoddart tribute night. We stayed out all night and played the next day under my captaincy, and we won. And remarkably, we won.
I was going to say, there's similar energy, actually.
Hopefully not the end of the story.
No, not the end of the story, the stuff before that.
Anyway, yeah, there was obviously a fair bit going on with the guy, but an incredibly capable athlete and someone who, is one of those. You said there's been 5 England wins since the war in Australia. There weren't many before the war either, and he's one of them in 1894-95.
Must have been good fun putting the book together.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the process of eliminating stories that feel close to us, and I can't remember exactly any of the off the top of my head now which hit the cutting room floor, but there was a very, very long list of about 150, and we slowly but surely whittled it down. We thought 211s would be appropriate, so 22 stories, and they range from ones that you might have a bit of a knowledge of, like you might have heard of a name or two, through to rogue stuff that there's almost no way you would have heard of. And it's all governed by, in our Patreon, people send in cricket numbers. So it all started with a lad called Phil Meng, who's a great guy. I've played some cricket with Phil in Australia and in England. He edited his contribution to the show to 222, like £2.22 or whatever, as a tribute to Richie Benaud's 2 for 22. And one thing led to another, and our very dedicated Patreon audience on The Final Word all started doing it. And 6 years later, Storytime's become its own living, breathing thing, and that's why the book was commissioned. And yeah, perfect for Christmas. And I kind of see people, on the train down to the G on Boxing Day with the book in their hands, having got it in their stocking, or maybe in this part of the world tucking into a chapter when they've had 12 pints before the first ball's bowled at Melbourne. That kind of energy will be what people bring to it, I suspect.
It's a really good Christmas present for genuine cricket fans. I think sometimes when cricket books are bought as presents for people, there's a danger that actually they already know quite a lot about the subject.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily that much new in the book. I can guarantee you will learn new things from this book.
That's a lovely plug. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's out today in the UK, Fairfield Books, and it's out in Australia on the 27th of November. 10th. 2 book launches, one in London, which will be after this is published probably, and then one in Melbourne, and we'll do the thing we're doing.
Well, that is everything for today's show. Cheers, Colin. Great having you on. Cheers, Lawrence. Safe travels to both of you.
Thank you.
Australia.
Can't wait.
We'll be back next Monday for our final pre-Ashes show. If you've liked the show, hit subscribe, leave a comment on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio, leave a little nice little rating on whatever app you're listening to, and see you next week.